Trustee Bear? Trustee Budinger? Here. Trustee Johnson?
Here.
Trustee Knudsen?
Here.
Trustee Meck?
Here.
Trustee Pattison?
Here.
Mayor Bachran?
Here. All right, we have a quorum and we can continue. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I hear a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, that motion passes. Next thing on the agenda is announcements. Does anyone have any announcements? Yes, Tammy.
I just want to remind everybody that there is a total lunar eclipse tonight. It starts at 3:44 a.m., ends at 5:25 and 54 seconds a.m., and the maximum eclipse is at 5:18 a.m.
Thank you, Tammy. I won't be awake. All right, anything else? Okay, if not, I have a couple comments I'd like to make. First off, I would like to apologize for shouting at the last meeting. That was unprofessional behavior, and I will endeavor to react in a more measured manner in the future. The second, I would like to reiterate my support for community comment during the entire meeting procedures. You have the right to speak. However, with that right comes the responsibility to behave in accordance with Resolution 2017-10. Please raise your hand. If you want to speak, be recognized by the chair, come to the podium, state your name and address, and then make your comments. Please do not call people names. Please do not engage in personal attacks. The other thing I would like to say is, because we generally do not take any, answer any questions during the recognition of visitors and guests, if you have an issue that you want an answer on, please use the sign-up sheet in the back to give us your name and what your contact information and what your issue is so that we can get back with you and get you any answers. All right, that being said, who would like to address the board this evening on a matter that is not on the agenda? Mayor Wilkening. All right. Do you know how to use you need to push? Yes. Did the little red light come on? No. Then the power button on the side is not on.
Here we go. I'm Larry Wilkening. I'm the mayor of Hotchkiss. I am up here just to thank the mayor, the council, the Paonia Police Department, and the citizens of Paonia for allowing the town of Hotchkiss to use a couple of your deputies while we were shorthanded. I think it's a great gesture. It's a great municipal cooperation, and I hope that we can return the favor sometime. But again, thank you very much. It was very much appreciated.
You are ever so welcome, sir. Thank you. All right, Paige.
Paige Smith, 215 Delta, and I have two things I wanted to speak about that are not on the agenda. And the first is the JDS hydro draft report, and I will put this on my request form in the back, but now that all the trustees have a copy, I'm asking if the public can also review it as well. I would love to be able to look at that. And my other comment with regards to that is that because it's a public document paid with public funds about a public resource, I feel like it is public information. And as part of that, any comments that are made by the people reviewing it that are probably primarily the Water Advisory Board members and Travis perhaps as well, that those comments should be made public as well as how they may or may not have changed the final report. So that's my one piece of information. The other piece that is not on the agenda, but I wanted to point out that 2 weeks ago there was a motion made to bring up at the next meeting a review of the powers of the mayor. and that is not on this agenda, and I just wanted to identify that that is missing, and hopefully can be brought up at another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Bruner.
Bill Brunner, 608 2nd Street, Paonia. So I think this board is in violation of the open meetings law. It requires you to state the purpose of an executive session in some detail and state the question to be asked of your attorney when you're going in for advice. Your last session was for advice on a matter not allowed to be discussed in executive session. Read the homily that you mumble through before you take a motion to go into executive session, not concerning a member of this board. So I think the statement should have included some statement about how you're going to thread that needle to get advice on something you can't talk about in that session. And also, the open meetings law requires that you state the question to be asked of the attorney. These are serious matters, and I hope you will tell us how you threaded that needle and what the question was. Please. On the water report, the refusal to make that public is an outrage given the history of previous reports. And the assertion that this is work product is a fiction. Work product is for staff to make recommendations to administrators to help them make decisions. None of that applies here. JD Hydro is not staff. There is no decision to be made by administrator, and in fact, there is no decision to be made by this board. That power was removed by the public when they enacted the moratorium. The voters put the power of that decision in the hands of the engineers. You pick JD Hydro, and their report is that decision. I'm not going to mess around with Cora on this. My approach is to go straight to a citizens initiative requiring all water-related documents are made public regardless of any silly designation that you want to put on them. By the next meeting, this should be well on its way to the street. I will email you the text of the initiative, and I welcome your comments. I sincerely would like to see any initiative that I start be as good as it can be, and if there's a way to make it better, let's talk about it. And I hope it's on your next agenda. You may also be interested to know that I have actually corred all comments on the JD Hydro report. I think they'll be very interesting. I had a statement on the mayor's conduct that I'm going to forego at this time, but I do want to say that it was premeditated, and yes, it was premeditated, and this board's not doing that good a job. It's time to stop sleepwalking behind people pushing you this way and that, and start making your own decisions, please. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bruner. Yes, Ms. Watson.
Suzanne Watson. I'd like to say during the last meeting, Mayor Bachran stated that Resolution 2017-10 excludes executive sessions from public comment. But when I read this resolution, I do not see executive sessions excluded. In fact, executive sessions are listed and numbered as agenda items on our agenda. And in Section 8 of this resolution, we have a discussion of public comment, and it says, after discussion of an agenda item by the Board of Trustees has concluded, the mayor shall open the floor for comment from members of the public who shall be allowed the opportunity to comment or ask questions on the agenda item. So the agenda item was agenda item number 11 that you entered into. And you do have an obligation to discuss and consider comment before you vote, especially if the reason for the executive session is questionable. The audience has a right to let you know that we're concerned about what you're going to vote on. And the funny thing is, what happened is after I tried to comment, you voted, I tried to comment, and then after that, Trustee Knudsen recused himself. I believe Trustee Knudsen should have been given the opportunity to recuse himself during the discussion, before the vote. That should have been part of the discussion. And he was denied that right. Ironically, the executive session, to me, revealed, you were going to be talking about an ethics complaint about a public official, which I'm concerned about. I'm not sure that can be the topic of an executive session. But it's revealed a deeper issue with our town attorney and our mayor, and this obfuscation that I'm seeing, this attempt to kind of keep a lot of secrets. And I think in light of the whole concept of executive sessions, you're really treading on thin ice. We talk about wanting public trust. This is something that really undercuts the public's trust in its government. I also want to say, for people on YouTube, I discovered if you go to the settings for the YouTube, on the YouTube account, you can speed up the videos, but you can also go to the closed captioning, and you can see trustees' words in writing at the bottom of the screen. And it's really helpful because sometimes it's hard to hear people, but I've just discovered that YouTube actually has it all written out. So it's a lot easier to follow the meetings that way. So that hopefully that would be helpful. And then one final note, resolution, about meeting conduct. It's important for the members to follow this, but there's also an ordinance that requires the board to follow Robert's Rules of Order. And when discussions are spontaneously entered into at the front of the room here that are not agendized, it's not right, and it's confusing to the audience, because how do we react, especially when inaccurate information is being presented? That being said, I'd like to say there is an opening on the Planning Commission, because one of the board members' terms expired last month. So if there's not an opportunity to, statements are being made, and it's very frustrating in the audience when our hands are tied by a resolution, when the ordinance that you're supposed to be following isn't being followed. And I just want to express my frustration with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, let's move on to staff reports.
Mayor Backren.
I'm sorry, Michelle.
That's okay. If I could, I would like to make a motion.
Yes, please.
So there was a question of whether we have violated open meetings law, and I think that's a serious comment, and I'd like to add that to the agenda for the next meeting so that it can be properly discussed and reviewed legally.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Recusing myself.
Nay.
Okay, that motion passes. Please note that on the minutes, Amanda, so we can make sure it's on the next agenda. All right. Administrator's report was included in the packet. Town attorney's report, Mr. Nerlin. Well, let's see. Does anyone have any questions on the administrator's report that maybe I might be able to answer? Yes, Tammy, did you have?
I do wonder if there's an update on the RFP for the 3rd Street resurfacing. And I'm also wondering if the number one in the updates is, excuse me, is the grant for the JDS hydro water system evaluation.
Okay, maybe Cindy, do you have the answer to about the JDS updates on number one as far as documents to DOLA for the upgraded update? Oh, no. So DOLA stopped our contract with JDS because they needed to review it. And so we're waiting for them to get back to us. And they said it was going to be at least a couple weeks before they were able to do that.
So what grant is update number one referring to?
It is JDS
Oh, okay.
Hydro, but that's why JDS Hydro is no longer working on this, finishing up their report until they get approval from DOLA.
It just wasn't clear what the
Ah,
grant was,
okay.
so, okay. And then the RFP?
That I don't know. Travis, do we have an
The
RFP?
RFP is at SGM Engineering right now getting wrote up.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Dave.
I wondered about the general liability coverage, and I think the Play Street event
Yes.
is already happening to some degree, and I wondered why that's holding it up. Why do we have liability when they close a street? That's what I'm not understanding.
Well, I can try this and then we'll give Bo a chance to do it. CIRSA coverage is for town events. This is not a town event. So even though it's on our street, our insurance no longer covers this. So they are liable. So we are not liable, they are. Does that make sense?
Just want to make sure that this is not holding them up from doing their street
They're
event.
doing it. Yeah, because it was closed this last weekend. Did I get that right, Bo? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Yes, Michelle.
Follow up on that question. If, does CIRSA specifically say that the town's not liable or only that they won't cover it? I just want it to be really clear that, so that the citizens holding this event also know who has the liability if something should happen.
All right, you want to thread that needle, Bo?
Yeah, so there would be no coverage from CIRSA. Did that answer your question, Michelle?
No, I want to make sure that the town could not be held liable for the event, whether CIRSA is willing to cover it or not.
Well, generally, yes, under governmental immunity, so.
Okay, just, sorry, one more time for clarification.
Right.
That means we are not liable for the events that they're holding on Poplar.
I mean, we could go down a litany of issues in terms of what could present itself at this event. Generally, the town has liability from immunity, but for negligence or gross negligence. Or it's generally immune, but for negligence or gross negligence, excuse me.
Okay, so as long as the town is not doing something negligent regarding this event, then we are not liable for anything that may occur related to the street closure.
What do you want me to say with respect to anything?
Well, I'm mostly concerned about traffic incidents. Okay, and I know you don't give legal advice in a
Right.
meeting. It makes me nervous. I think the event's a great idea. It makes me very nervous to see this event going forward if the town would potentially be liable should there be a traffic incident related to a closure that we as board members have approved.
I think if that's a serious concern, you guys should reach out to the event holders and request that they get a policy in place and name the town as an additional insured.
Okay. In that case, I move that we request proof of a liability policy from the citizens holding the event.
Okay, do we have a second? Discussion by the board?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I like a degree of risk. That's just the way I live, and I just think this is over the top as far as a regulation preventing something fun in the town. So I'm going to be voting against this.
Other discussion from the board? Yes, Michelle.
If I may respond to that, I would respectfully disagree that it's our risk. It's the community's risk. This is the community's money that we're potentially making open to a lawsuit or some kind of liability, and I'm not comfortable with that.
Yes, Tammy.
So I just want to take an example. The painting of the mural in the street. Does the school district or does somebody have to come up with a proof of, what do you call it, a liability policy or liability insurance for that?
And I believe the school carried liability for that since their students were involved in it, and they basically supervised it along with the Creative Coalition and council, whoever did it, yeah.
So it does seem that this, if we're not covered for this by CIRSA, it does seem that it increases our liability. I agree. I know it's unlikely anything would happen, but all it takes is one little incident to change everything.
Yes, Mick.
Do we know how other towns have responded to this in form of liabilities? Is that something we could find out?
Yes, we could do that.
Yeah, I think it is important that we do that.
Okay. Yeah, first let's make sure nobody else on the board wants to say anything. Okay. Public? Yes. Paige.
215 Delta, and I have a very good example for you all. We used to have a block party at on our street in Cheyenne, Wyoming for years. A few years, probably after 12 years of it, I went in to get another permit from the city and was told that I had to have $1 million worth of liability to be on the city street. And none of our homeowners insurance, even my umbrella policy, did not cover it. So we had to forego what was the most fun thing ever and have it in people's yards. So I'm just giving you an example that it really is a real liability that I think you all should take seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Amy? Come to the podium, Amy. Hobble over.
Amy DeLuca, 40887 German Creek Drive.
Oh, turn it back on. Thank you.
I've been an event organizer in this community for about 10 years. And anytime we've ever thrown an event, we've presented our own insurance. So I feel like you're asking for something that's already happening. All the street closures I've been part of with the coalition, to the chamber, to Learning Council, to the Paradise Theater, we've always had an insurance policy for anything that happened outside of our brick and mortar if we had a brick and mortar. So tonight I'm here on behalf of the Creative Coalition, and we have gotten it. Last year we got insurance every time, cited the town. This year we're getting insurance again. So I feel like you're asking for something that's already in motion. How about now? Okay.
Yeah.
Also something that's already part of the event packet that we fill out for street closures. So maybe everybody doesn't even know what that packet looks like, but I'm just reminding you that it's already in place.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. You want to take a chair closer because you're going to get up again? All right, Suzanne.
So I actually happened to pass by, I believe I passed by the street closure, but it was incredibly unprofessional. There was a plywood board with a spray painted sign that said street closed. And as I was driving down 3rd Street, ahead of me there was a car that pulled out into 3rd Street coming on the cross street there, and they were very confused. They didn't know where to go. They didn't know what was going on, and I had to slow for them. So I was curious, is there any authority behind a homemade sign? I mean, what if someone decides that's not even a real sign and I can drive right through there? And then does the town have an obligation to, does the sign have to be a police sign? And then what does the model traffic code say about street closures? Do they ask you to put detour signs up? Is that a way to protect yourself from liability? And those are just questions. I don't know if the police can speak to that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Suzanne. Anything else from the public? All right. Dave.
I really like what Mick brought to the table, Trustee Johnson, about let's find out what other cities are doing before we make a decision on it. And I'd be willing to temper my risk-taking if I'm finding out that this is true. But we only have limited information to make this decision right now. So, you know, I think we should just hold off until we have more information on what best practices are with this.
Well, my concern is that in all likelihood it will be closed again this weekend. So there will not be time for us to find out unless we tell Barb to shut it down until we have more information and can make a decision. Yes.
I think that one reason that it's in our forms for street closures and all the organizations take care of that is because the organizations are an organization. This is a group of people, just residents. There is no organization under there. There's no umbrella here. So they may have some difficulty getting a policy. It's just a comment.
Okay, well, Dave, if you want to amend the motion. No. Okay, Mr. Bruner.
I'm sure it deserves a lot of really deep thought, but for the immediate case, perhaps if the town supplied some official-looking signs and the town made the closure, that it would, because I mean, I saw that sign too, and it was really bush. I was walking my dog, and when I came back, somebody knocked him over. Maybe if you made it look like the town was closing the street, it would help in the short term.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? Okay, Michelle.
I just feel we're trying to have it both ways. So I feel like either this is a town-sanctioned event and we provide the materials they need to close the street, we provide the insurance coverage, and we require just the normal street closure forms, or this is not a town-sanctioned event and maybe we shouldn't be involved at all. Maybe this doesn't come before the board and the board doesn't make a decision. If somebody puts a street closure sign up, then that's on them personally and not on us.
Okay. Well, that creates its own liability. Okay. Turn on your mic, please, Bo.
Sorry, I don't mean to be argumentative, but then if we have constructive notice of this event, and even though it's not sanctioned, we're not doing anything to enforce it, and something happens, that's actually greater liability for the town.
Okay, then my motion stands. I think we need a liability policy from the organizers, just like we would for any other street closure.
Okay. Any further discussion from anybody? All right, seeing none. Do you want to read the motion back so we make sure we know what we're talking about?
Yeah. Proof of liability insurance from the event holder.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Hey,
All right, that motion carries. I guess I will contact Ms. Heck and explain the situation to her. All right. Next on the agenda is the town attorney's report. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Smith, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you for that's why my emphatically. Did you all have your tour of the water plant today?
Well, no, what we're doing is a video tour, and David Jacobson is making the video. He is still working on finishing editing it, and as soon as it's edited, then we'll be able to view it. And so it'll be on the website, I'm sure, so that anybody can view it as well.
Oh, good. Thank you. So my second point is Russo Paonia. So I don't know if you all saw the flyer that's on the webpage. Wow, sorry. I must have it. So I have to tell you, I'm really quite upset about what it looks like next to the skate park in Town Park. And here's my, I have several things.
Oh, it just went off again.
I'll just hold it. Sorry. How's that?
Oh, and mine.
Really? Oh, there we go. Oh, gosh. Sorry, YouTube. So I went there today, and I am appalled at what a mess is in the park next to the skate park. So I have several questions, and the first is, this is spruce up for those of us that pay for garbage in the town of Paonia, and we have it picked up at our residences. Why would I take my tires to Town Park if I wanted to have them picked up? So I'm questioning, why are we paying for anyone who wants to dump their unbelievable mess, and that we are paying for? I do not understand why, and I'm quite upset that I am paying for what is a mess. So, and I have to ask, so people could bring yard waste, I could have put it back with my trash. Paint, why would the town of Paonia encourage people to throw away paint when the state of Colorado has a paint recycling program, and the town of Paonia is already planning a paint recycle roundup in July? It just does not make sense, and the landfill does not want paint, whether it's hardened or not. You do not want to put that in if you can recycle it. Where is our environmental ethic? And you do not want to put oil-based paint into the landfill. Oil-based was not told as considered prohibitive here. And oil, you do not want to put waste oil in the landfill. That is actually a prohibited flammable liquid when you get right down to it. So let me just continue. Refrigerators, and if you didn't are going to be charged $50, do you all remember the Montreal Protocol that was in place to keep Freon out of our environment because of the ozone hole? This is ridiculous. Emptying their refrigerator of Freon. That Freon is a regulated and hazardous waste, and you have to be certified to empty Freon in a freezer or refrigerator. Generally, it's older ones, but those are the ones people want to get rid of. And how? Okay. All right. Sorry. Now it's working, but I know. Turn this. All right. Oh, good. Thank you. I'm up. Is it? E. Is it working? So my other question is, how much money is going to be spent to be must be something here. So my point, we should not be paying for people in the North Fork Valley to throw their trash in the park. And it should be limited to putting trash out in where our cans are, so that the staff can screen whether or not they can take any of these materials. So I would love you all to go look at this, so you can see what we're paying for, because I can't imagine what a mess it's going to be to clean this up until the 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. You know, I think we're going to, before we go on, let me try one thing. I'm going to move the podium over next to the little thing. Maybe that'll work. All right, thank you very much, Paige. Travis, would you like to address any of these issues about that?
The oil is not thrown in the dump. It is recycled. The paint is recycled. We keep it at the shop until recycle days. It's just a way to be able to get it closer to the spot where they can pick it up in a bulk. The refrigerators are hauled to the landfill that are free of Freon. The tires are disposed of through a company that comes and picks them up and shreds them for top dressing in landfills that they've used quite a few times. And the trash and the roll-offs and stuff is being addressed. It'll be cleaned up.
Thank you, Travis. Michelle, did you have something to say?
Well, I do think that Paige made, am I on? Okay. I think that Paige made a good point about the dumpsters. I'd like to learn more about, I'd like to hear from our administrator when she's back, maybe like a final report on the cleanup, how it went, what the costs were, and how we might be more efficient and cost aware next year.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Anything else on the yes, Suzanne?
I just wanted to make a comment about paint recycling. The town's instructions says you put kitty litter in the paint before you take it to the dumpsters. And I don't think any recycler is going to recycle paint with kitty litter in it, especially if it's consolidated. So I dispute that. And also, since no one's monitoring anything, it could get tossed into the dumpster. I mean, I don't know if our staff goes through the haul-off dumpster, but I doubt it because it's so packed with huge tree branches. It's puffy and springy and impenetrable, and I think it just all gets rolled off, and it gets stuck in the landfill, and there's no monitoring. Thanks.
Thank you. There was another comment from the public? No. All right. Let's move on then with the town attorney's report. Bo?
Thank you, Mayor. My report was distributed to the trustees and included in the packet. Wanted to highlight a couple of items. With respect to the question that was presented itself during the public comment period, is determined because we have this training scheduled with Sam Light, with CIRSA, that subsequent to that training we would address the powers provided to the mayor. Just felt like it tied in really nicely with respect to highlighting some of those concerns. With respect to that training date, the date that's the nearest possible date or closest possible date that works for Mr. Light is June 28th. So we went ahead and selected that, and hoping that it works for everybody. Speaking of scheduling meetings or special meetings, also included in my report is that Delta County would like to either have an agenda item or a special meeting to discuss the North Fork Valley Airport and the current memorandum of understanding that's in place between the town of Paonia and Delta County. Like to schedule that before the third week of June. So it's the trustees' decision in terms of if you want to put it on the first June meeting or if you'd like to have a special meeting to discuss that. And those are the highlights of my report, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
All right. Here's what we're going to do. Let's first see if anyone wants to put that airport agenda item on the first meeting in June versus setting a special meeting.
I'd like to move to put it to the first meeting in June.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Yes.
We already have two special meetings. June 15th is when we're hearing from the Colorado Oil and Gas. June 28th now is when we're doing another special meeting. So I think putting it on the agenda makes more sense.
Okay. Any other discussion from the board? Yeah, Michelle.
Do we have any idea of how much time they're looking for related to this item?
They want to discuss the current MOU, provide the trustees with some of the history and background with respect to where we are, and talk about frankly, cost contribution and the future relationship between the parties, I would say probably a half hour, 45 minutes at a minimum. Is that, yeah.
Okay.
Is it possible to get that MOU before the packet goes out?
Yeah, we can have, I can get it to Cindy and have it distributed to the trustees.
Also, Bo, do you know if the Airport Advisory Committee is meeting prior to that?
I think they're meeting the third week of June. That's why they wanted the town to weigh in before that meeting.
So is Delta County or the advisory committee going to be presenting?
I'm sorry, please repeat
Is Delta County or is the Airport Advisory Committee going to be attending?
Delta County. I think it would be good if we asked Mr. Sweeterman to attend as the airport advisory representative for Paonia.
Okay, great. Any other discussion? Okay, anything from the public? All right, seeing none, all in favor of putting that on the agenda for the 11th?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right, thank you very much, Bo. Any other questions for Bo before we go forward?
I have just an administrative request. Since this didn't make it into the public packet for this meeting, could we have the attorney's report added to the packet for the next meeting?
Happy to. It was delivered on Friday, which is my normal deadline, but not this week or last week, so I apologize.
Yes, Cindy.
That is Corinne's intent.
Okay. All right. All right, moving on, treasurer's report, Mr. King. What?
Sorry, we were also talking about scheduling the CIRSA training, and I think we
Oh, it's
skipped over
already been,
that.
oh, do we, yes, do we have a time? Yes, we do.
We already have a time for that?
We have a date, June 28th. I think we were just thinking in the evening. June 28th.
Okay. Does the board need to set a time, or will we be notified of the?
Yeah, no, you guys should go ahead and set a time. I think that would be great.
Okay.
The mayor, you call it without, let's just go ahead and do a picture.
Okay, you want to set a time?
I propose 5:30 p.m. on the 28th.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, anything from the public? Yes, Suzanne.
Thanks for doing this. I know it's not required, I mean, this is for the Board of Trustees, but if you could invite the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board of Adjustment to the meeting if they'd like to attend, and of course the public can attend, but there are topics that are discussed that are relevant to the Zoning Board of Adjustment and the Planning Commission. And so I've never seen those commissions invited to these trainings, but I think they would be incredibly helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anything else from the public? All right, seeing none, we have a motion and a second to make this 5:30 p.m. on June 28th. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right, now you're up, Mr. King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We've reviewed the payroll and released for payment, reviewed disbursements with the Finance and Personnel Committee, and recommend approval. I've received no calls from the board or the public relative to the fund balance and financial policy. And I wish to advise the board that I will be out of Colorado next week, and I ask the administrator to release the payroll on my behalf. That concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Mr. King. Any questions for Mr. King? Yes, Michelle?
Are we going over the fund balance and reserve policy in any detail? Okay, just wanted to make sure. I have no other questions. Thank you.
I just want to make sure I'm commenting at the right point. Had a question about, that's on page 21, and I wanted to make sure that's still part of the treasurer's report. It is? Okay. Are
these the overall fund balances?
right? Is that part of the treasurer's report?
Sure, we can respond.
Thank you. I just never quite can figure that out. So I just have a question on page 21, towards the top of the table. I was looking at the entries for law enforcement revenue, capital improvement, and street capital improvement. And each one of those have a pretty large deficit from what was collected for the first 3 months to what was budgeted. So I'm sure these things happen, but I'm just curious as to whether this is expected and is it any cause for alarm?
Thank you for pointing that out. No, there's no cause for alarm, especially as far as the police department is concerned. We pay workman's compensation in bonds and insurance in advance, and it's amortized over the succeeding 12-month period. So that would be diminished as time progressed through the budget year. And the other two items that you were worried about?
Oh, it was capital improvement and street capital improvement.
I'm going to let Ms. Jones respond to that.
So capital improvement is prior year fund balance that is being used. And what was the other one? I'm sorry.
And it's actually at the bottom of that table, I believe, street capital improvement. At the bottom of the first table on that page.
I'm sorry, Paige. I'm not clear on what you're looking at.
We're on page 21.
Yes.
And we're trying to find out where you're looking.
And if you'll let me just grab my computer.
I guess it's this one right here. So do 144,000.
The overall
That's
summary,
remaining.
correct, Paige?
Right. It's in the overall summary, correct.
And this is
Can you
revenue versus,
Can we just make it easy? Can you bring it over here and show it to me,
yeah.
please? We can talk about it all day long.
Well, of course that would be that. Sorry. Oh, good grief.
It's a day for technical.
Forget it.
All right, Paige, you want to look on
What
my
I can
computer?
tell you is this,
See if you can find mine.
so Paige,
Don't touch anything, it's been bad today.
this top part is revenue,
Yes.
this is expenditures, and this is net.
And it's this one right here, capital improvement under overall summary, I believe.
So this is revenue,
Yep, and see how
and-
it's 82,000.
that is remaining.
But it's the first 3 months budget. It looks like we budgeted quite a bit for the first 3 months and it came in quite a bit under. So that's all. It just, being no math miss, I just was.
So you're looking at a remaining
Right, and it looked like you had budgeted quite a bit
remaining
more.
to come in.
Right. A lot less came in the first 3 months than you had anticipated, if I'm reviewing all those columns correctly. And it just jumped out at me, and I didn't know if it was a reason for concern. If we're still on our budget year, okay. Thank you.
I'll review the, I have a feeling it's a spreadsheet problem.
Okay,
review
yes,
it.
Suzanne.
I also had a question about the budget here, and I don't know, one way I think it would be appropriate just to go and ask Cindy, but then maybe the board. So I'm looking at page 12 under the building permits, and you have a 2021 current year-to-date actual, and then 3-month budget. And the line item is 12-32-03, building permits. And then there's a blank line under that, which I'm a little confused about what those balances pertain to, because there's some different numbers here. And so what are we seeing here as far as building permits, the revenue so far for this year? Is that 7,000 for the 3-month budget, or is it the actual, I mean, is it 4,000, is it 2,800?
The 3,000 difference between the actual year-to-date revenues for the building department. We had budgeted $7,798.58. Obviously, as you look at the building permits, we're way under the number that we had anticipated.
Okay.
That's where the difference is.
Okay, so the follow-up question I have is, I was looking at our disbursements, and in February, there was a check to the building inspector for $2,143, and in March, there's a $3,185 check for a total of $5,328. So I'm wondering if we're under budget for building permits, where is this money coming from to pay him? And are we just being a pass-through for some of those fees that he's charging, and they're not showing up on our accounts, but they're going directly to...
Excuse me, Ms. Watson, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm
Okay.
looking under expenses, and I'm looking at contract labor.
Okay.
I see an expense of $1,005 that was
Okay.
expended in February. Where are the numbers that you're quoting?
I I was looking at the checks that were written
Oh,
in the disbursements, and that's on page 21. And I'm sorry, I'm going
those are
forward in the
out-of-period
packet.
disbursements. They're paid in the month of May, and they're ensuing pursuant to the months previous
Okay.
outside the period of this financial report.
Okay, so I guess I was just wondering where we were,
On permits?
yeah, on permits, and then the fees that we've been paying. So the fees, okay, so the things that were, well, no, because in the packet it says it's February, the building inspector is getting $2,143, and for March, he's getting a check for $3,185. So this does pertain to February and March here in these numbers in the packet. And I suppose I can get my answer later if you'd like to take some time with that, but I wanted to express my concern.
Well,
Here. If
they
you
would be
could,
billed for billing periods. I realize that they're not as timely as when the services were provided as to when we pay it. Those services are provided before they bill us, and we bill them and pay, or billed and paid at a subsequent date. So
Okay.
these are just out-of-period expenses. I
Okay.
cannot answer your question on the level
Okay.
of permits that we've issued in that interim period.
okay. Cindy had it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Cindy.
So $2,000 of some of this billing is last year's, is carried over from last year. So does that answer your question?
Actually, that's more confusing, but I can clear that up with you, maybe at a later date. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. King? Yes, Michelle.
Just while we're talking budgets and details, we had mentioned during our last budget cycle, last November, December, that it was kind of a painful process, and part of what we might do to make it a better process this year is talk about budget more frequently through the year, or get into it in a little more depth prior to those budget sessions. We haven't really done that yet, and we're almost halfway through the year. So I'm wondering if we might want to get something on the agenda soon to just have a preliminary budget discussion, review some analysis of our budget actual, and make sure the board has a better idea of where we stand before November.
Okay. Cindy, how involved are you with the audit?
Thank you, Mary. Yes, as soon as I get the audit completed, then I will be moving on to starting the budget process. I generally start the budget process in August. So we have from August to the first meeting in December. That's all going to be budget. Does that answer your question?
It does. I understand that you're very busy with the audit. I just, I hope to start seeing some analysis of the numbers earlier in that process rather than later. I personally feel that that would be a big help in understanding what we're looking at.
Okay, well, and the
Maybe-
other thing to understand,
Maybe
about-
you could give me an example of what you're talking about. Because I'm giving you budget to actual right here. This is then what number analysis, so I'm not clear on what you're looking for.
So I don't want to monopolize meeting time. I'm happy to follow up with you by email, but I'm talking about more of a narrative analysis. Like, the numbers are great, but it doesn't tell us if we're in line with where you expect. So as Treasurer King was saying, even though we've overspent for the first 3 months on the police department, that's expected because of the way that we spend out those funds. And knowing that makes a difference in what those numbers look like and how we interpret those numbers. So having some of, these are things that we just, I shouldn't speak for the rest of the board. These are things that I just don't know off the top of my head. I don't know that we're paying those things up front, and that's why we're front loaded on that budget item. So having some of that narrative analysis explaining why we are where we are, and if staff feels like we need to make changes, I think would help the board make decisions. Is that more clear?
Honestly, no. So can we have a conversation that's just between us and you and
Sure.
figure, I'm happy to do it. I
Okay.
just am not clear on, we're not speaking the same language, so let's have a conversation so we can get on the same page.
Okay.
anything else? All right, let's move on to disbursements.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve accounts payable in the amount of $26,905.92, that we approve a transfer to Summit of $125,000, that we approve a transfer to payroll of $22,814.87, that we approve payroll taxes at $26,002.14, and that we have a payroll direct deposit of $22,814.87.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, questions for Dave and Karen? Yes, Michelle.
Question about the third item. So the public notice, my assumption would be that that's in the newspaper, but it's allocated to Column Software, so I'm wondering who that is. I tried to Google them and didn't have any luck.
They're a subcontractor for the DCI, and it includes our ad costs.
It's actually run by Colorado Press Association. They are trying to really promote support of local newspapers for running legal notices. And if you Google Colorado Press Association column, you should find it. There's a great story on there about it from last November, I believe.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, any other questions? Yes, Michelle.
Just wanted to check in again on any progress with electronic billing, since I see that blue postcard charge.
No, we are not currently moving forward on that item.
Okay. Anything else from the board? All right, seeing none, Suzanne?
I noticed the public noticing disbursement there for $900. And I was noticing in the new DMA contract, and I believe it's in the old one as well, that they agree to pay up to $500 for advertising an ordinance. And I didn't go and look at the old contract, but I believe the old ordinance, but I believe it's in there, and it should be investigated. And I think it also says in the new one that you can't pass that charge on to the users. So if the council could look into that, there might be something that could be applied to that expense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And yes, Cindy.
Corinne has billed DMEA for the publication.
Corinne has billed the MEA for notifications. Okay. All right, anything else? All right, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, discussion. All right, and nothing from the board? Anything from the public? Yes, Paige.
At the intro to the minutes, it looks like it's a holdover from a previous meeting. It's referencing April 27th, 2021, and is linking to the wrong YouTube. And then I also wanted to point out on page, I believe it's 36, there's simply a typo above the last table on the bottom of the page, which looks like a throwback from a cut and paste. The word tax is in the title. And did I get that page number right? Do you see where I mean? Great, thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, that motion passes. Let's move on to unfinished business, community member ethics complaint. Ms. Watson, would you like to address the board?
Suzanne Watson. I actually don't have a lot to say on this topic. I think the fact that you've scheduled the SURSA meeting is, it's something I'm very happy to see. I think it's, my ethics complaint was basically a concern with the intermingling, going beyond the administrator as you're required in this form of government, and working directly with staff members. And that's something that people have been warned and punished for and fired for in the past. So I believe I kind of saw it happening now, being that Corinne has been absent from these meetings and there are discussions happening. But I'm willing to just kind of sit back and wait to see what happens after the SURSA training, because I think there's just going to be a lot of valuable information that's offered. I think a lot of this might just have to do with the fact that we've had the pandemic and there's been limited opportunities to get training going here. So training is always good. It's taken me a long time to, I mean, I didn't pick everything up. I'm sure I made some really bad mistakes when I was a trustee, and it's something that always going back to that source. I think it's a kind of a lifelong process of learning that we're always doing. So thank you for scheduling the SURSA event. Thanks.
Thank you, Suzanne, and I agree with you completely. I think training is fundamental and should happen at least, every time we get a new board, and it would be better if it was annually, actually. So, is there any further discussion from the board on this issue? Yes, Mr. King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to have an opportunity to introduce into the record my observation relative to this issue. In the complaint that was presented, there is a comment that said he presented a calendar specific to Finance Officer Cindy Jones' work schedule. I would like to correct that to state that Ms. Jones had prepared and presented her work schedule to myself and to the town administrator as an illustrative example of how difficult it is for her to schedule vacation and personal time vis-a-vis the work requirements that we demand of her in the conduct of her job. And this was done prior to this meeting, and I am not privy to what happened subsequent to her giving that information to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Anyone else like to say anything? Tammy. All right, Tammy then. All right.
So I think everybody's taken this sufficiently seriously enough. I notice on page 54 there is a choice of the board reserves to take the right to take one or more of the following steps after considering the seriousness, duration, and or repeated nature of the violation. It seems to me that just the training, the remedial training, A, is sufficient in this case, and just hope we never have to revisit this again under these conditions. So that's just my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Tammy. All right, Karen?
I mistook this complaint as a complaint against the Personnel and Finance Committee. I was there during the time. I mean, Dave didn't do anything that I didn't do, etc. At no time did we give Ms. Jones any direction or anything. We were discussing an upcoming matter of personal time off. There's a new federal law coming into next year, and we were discussing how to get employees time off. And Miss Jones presented her own calendar. We did not ask her for that. It was just, something. We had discussed this with the administrator the week before. This was ongoing from that week. And at the time that we said that, okay, would you leave? We're going to discuss a personnel item. Miss Watson did leave. What she did not know is that Miss Jones also left. Dave and I, as a personnel committee, discussed with Corinne a personnel item. So there was no violation, and I just wanted that for the record.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, Suzanne.
So what I would like to, I don't know, it's not reiterate, but in other committee meetings, whether it be the Public Works Committee or the Safety and Governmental Affairs, sometimes there's an officer present, and they can answer questions for the committee, but the administrator's always there. The administrator's the facilitator, and the committee is going directly through the administrator to discuss with the chief of police, for instance. I don't think I would expect the Public Works Committee to start discussing the plan of the water system alone with Travis without the administrator present. And so that's kind of what I was seeing here is, I wish I could attend more, but I have work. But the times that I have attended these committee meetings, the administrator is not present to be that intermediary during the discussions. And it's really easy to kind of get off topic or talk about other things. So it's just, there is really no description of the personnel committees anywhere in our laws or resolutions. And it's not always very clear exactly what their function is. So I believe the CIRSA training will be helpful with that. Because certainly I know you guys don't feel like you're doing anything incorrect, but it could be just a lack of information that leads you. So I was a little alarmed by that, and I don't think it was really specific. I did name Trustee Knudsen's name, but it was the committee as a whole and, staff in attendance. But the fact that to me, it seems like Corinna's kind of bowed out of the personnel committee and is I haven't been to all your meetings, so I can't really say, but that's what it appeared like to me. And I could be mistaken, But just to be safe, I do believe the trustee training is really important to reiterate things and just to learn more. And I might learn something more from it. I certainly plan on attending too. So thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Yes, Michelle.
Yeah, just one comment. I also look forward to the training. I think it's the right next step for us, and I do think we've taken the complaint seriously and we're taking the right step to address it. At the same time, as a new trustee, I will admit I was confused by what the GAPS committee is, what the GAPS committee does, what we're tasked with, and what we're responsible for. So I hope that subsequent to that training, maybe we can develop some written guidance for our committees, because I don't think we have anything right now. I couldn't find anything in our ordinance or in our code that specifically lays out, this is the committee, this is their responsibility. So that's all.
All right. Yes, Dave.
I think what we have is a very good example of something that happened out of context. There's only been one meeting that was attended by a member of the public, despite my requests for members of the public, meeting after meeting. We're signing checks tomorrow, please come in. No one shows, no one shows. Then we have one person show. We had a policy discussion that had been lasting over the last 2 months in our meetings. And instead of a person who I consider I have a good communication relationship with, I would have expected that person to come to me and say, here's what I think I saw. Can you give me context on it? Instead, we got a 4 or 5 page formal complaint. So I just felt that the whole thing was out of context for who we are for the town of Paonia. I've been trying to keep my mouth shut about it to let the process play out. I think it's playing out to a very good conclusion. I think the education is a good thing. But I was upset that a person sees a bit of context, and this happens to a lot of us as elected officials. We have a lot of information coming at us. We're here time after time after time, and so we have quite a context in what we're trying to do. But if you see a piece of it, check in with us. That's what I ask. Thank you.
All right. Any further comments? Yes, Mick.
I guess I was a little surprised that just one member of the committee was pointed out to be in violation when, you know, there was more than one there. So with that said, I think, yeah, the educational training will be great for all of us. Yeah, thank you.
All right, last chance. All right. All right, let's move on then to number 6. I'm sorry, what? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Bruner. Pardon? Oh, please.
So, Bill Bruner, 608 Second. Yeah, I don't think anybody's really questioning motives or anything here, but I didn't really prepare a speech on this, but I want to point to another ongoing matter that's been going on for, I think, about 4 years now. It's on its 3rd trial, okay, is Pace versus Paonia. There was a Cora thing with me that the town lost. He paid my lawyer $30,000. There's been another settlement with Mr. Pace, if memory serves. He got about $10,000 there, and now there's a federal case ongoing. And an issue central to this case is a member of the board, an elected official, was involved in this in a way that was not, it was beyond his office. And it's a real good example of how not having a process in place, and when somebody says process, people glaze over. Well, think due process. It's guaranteed in the Constitution. You've got to have laws, the processes of how this stuff happens. And as a trustee, there's not very much that's given to trustees as power by the law. As far as I know, you have to attend meetings, you can make motions, and you have to vote. Okay, beyond that, you have to vote on something to make it a law, so you have the power to do it. And there's a new case that just came down in Basalt, an appeals court decision over executive sessions, The result is you have to follow that law going into executive session. And one of the statements in that published decision is that you cannot evade your responsibility to your statutory responsibilities through a contract. And so if you've got a contract with an administrator that says they're supervised by the mayor, but there is no statute that backs that up, that contract doesn't mean a thing, okay? I think, you know, the committee structure, it's a good idea, but overall, I don't think that any trustee should be involved in any administrative matter. It's not your job. You've given that, you've specifically tasked that to the administrator in an ordinance. It's the administrator's ordinance. You've got code of conduct or ethics that prevents you from stepping on the administrator's toes. And you got water to worry about. You got laws that are totally scrambled. You got all kinds of things to do. And so when you have no legal peep in any ordinance or law that says you've got this, you should have this committee, or that this committee should do this or that, I mean, it just doesn't exist. So, you know, I don't know. That's my comments. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move on now to the number 6 DMEA franchise agreement update. So we got Bo's legal opinions and his case work on this.
Just
Bo?
for clarification, that's not my legal opinion. That's
Oh,
from
I
DM.
mean, yes.
Yeah.
The case that you summarized it nicely for us, Bo.
No, that's directly.
Oh, thank you. So I am completely mistaken then. All right. So we are on the second reading of the DMEA franchise agreement update.
Now, this is not the second reading. This is strictly to discuss the fees issue that presented itself in
thank
the
you.
memo that was included. And also with, we've got Jim here, who's a representative of DMEA, in terms of if the board has any questions with respect to the memo that was included in the packet. So.
Thank you very much, Bo, for keeping me straight. All right, Jim.
Madam Mayor, I don't know if you had enough time to review the memo. I think it might be most efficient if I just stand for questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Questions? Yes, Dave.
We had this discussion courtesy of our treasurer, who pointed out to us in the finance committee meeting that there is an exemption for industrial of paying the franchise fee, and I wondered if that's standard practice.
It is common, yes. The typical municipalities will exempt, at least in our experience, will exempt industrial customers. My understanding, it is a small enticement to help attract industrial loads to the various municipalities.
And is part of the rationale also the fact that typically an industry uses a huge amount of electricity anyway?
That's a fair statement.
Yeah.
To be categorized in an industrial rate, you would be a large user of electricity, yes.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? All right, seeing none. Any questions from the public? Yes, Suzanne.
So I was wondering if it would be possible to, I mean, I'm familiar with the old ordinance, but I'm kind of wondering what changes have been made in this new one. And is there any list or strike and underline that can be provided by DMEA, or I don't know if Ross King, Treasurer King, is the one who worked on the franchise agreement with DMEA.
I did not.
Okay. Does DMEA have any strike and underline, or just a list of things that might have been significant that have changed, or do I have to put each side by side and try to compare them?
Yeah, so if the trustees wanted to request that, we could probably work with DMEA to get a quick white paper together. Again, this is not to have the second reading on the franchise agreement, but just to highlight the concerns that were raised with respect to the calculation of the franchise fee.
Okay. And can I just read off the wording for the FRUTA ordinance on about the franchise fee? It's very short. So I did notice that we have a section in the ordinance under definitions. We have a definition section. I'm not sure if we had that before. But gross revenue is defined. And in the FRUTA ordinance, it reads gross revenue, and I'm going to change the wording to be as if it were electrical. They have it for their cable service. But so it would say gross revenue means any revenue as determined in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles received by the grantee from the operation of the electrical system to provide electric services in the service area, provided, however, that such phrase shall not include, number one, any taxes, fees, or assessments collected by the grantee from the subscribers for pass-through to a government agency, including, without limitation, the franchise fee and any other sales or utility taxes. And it goes on, but that's the significant portion. And then they, in their ordinance, they say franchise fees may be passed through to subscribers as a line item on the subscriber bill. And I want to say it would be just kind, perhaps, if you included that in the ordinance. I know we're not talking about a lot of money coming from sales taxes to the franchise fee, but it's just the principle. It kind of looks like the town is nickel and diming people. Are you not satisfied with 3% franchise fee for the care of these properties that we are also charged for in our property taxes and any other tax we pay? Sales taxes for groceries goes to capital improvement fund. But to charge a sales tax on top of the franchise fee, you know, to the franchise fee that you're asking DMEA to collect, seems a little bit, it just doesn't, it just would be, it would seem generous if the town, just in wording, would say, we won't do that to you. And it's not like it brings the town that much money, but it just, it's the appearance more than anything else. It feels a little unjust. Thank you.
All right. Well, would the board like to direct Attorney Nerlin to do, or in conjunction with DMEA, get a white paper or a red line copy? Yes, Michelle.
Should this be a motion? I'm not clear on how we're doing this.
Yeah, just direction.
I would like to see either a red line copy or a white paper.
A white paper would be a lot better because that's the 20-year-old thing.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah, that works. And in relation to the public comment we received, I wonder if we define gross revenues consistently across any agreements that we have with other entities, I think that would be a fair approach, and I just don't know the answer to that.
So, I can't answer that for every franchise agreement that we have in place because there's a number of them that predate me, but I believe that the consistency applies, and that goes back to, frankly, how we have the language in the municipal code, with as included here in the memo, where it refers to what we look at for the definition of sales and use tax. So if there was going to be a change, it would need to be amendment to be an ordinance to the code to meet the suggested definition as provided by the public.
Okay. Yes, Michelle?
The definition provided by the public makes perfect sense to me from just an intuitive standpoint. At the same time, I'm not willing to take that on at this time and suggest that we rewrite all of our franchise agreements and our code. But, yeah.
All right, so the direction is to go ahead and get a white paper on this. Okay? Yes. Okay, Dan.
Just for clarification, the request is for a white paper that basically gives you a narrative of differences between the agreement in place now and the one that's being proposed to be adopted?
Correct.
Okay. I will get with legal counsel. I think we can accommodate that. Bo, off the top of my head, I'm not remembering our time frame here.
We've got the second Tuesday in June.
Okay.
We can get offline, but I think we can get something. You and I can work together the next week.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Suzanne.
Thanks. The different franchises have fees that are calculated differently. DMEA does it a certain way, but Kinder Morgan, I think, does it another way. And then you have the cable franchises, and I believe the Charter or Spectrum franchise contract was updated last fall, but it was not done in the form of an ordinance, from what I can tell. And the statute requires that franchises are done in the form of an ordinance. So you need to do an ordinance for the contract that you approved last fall. And if that means changing the franchise fee wording in there to align itself with the DMEA ordinance, perhaps it would be a very appropriate time, since you have not passed an ordinance yet. Thanks a lot.
All right. Anything further need to be done then? No. All right, then let's move on to Ordinance 2021-03, the Board of Appeals. So this was amended, and I know there are issues in our code that will need to be changed to bring this into compliance, or bring the code into compliance with this new ordinance on the Board of Appeals. But is there any comment, questions, concerns from the board? Yes, Michelle.
So just to clarify on section 181110A, it specifies that the 4 members of the Zoning Board of Adjustment shall serve on the Building Code Board of Appeals. In Chapter 2, Article 8 of our code, it says that the Zoning Board of Adjustment has 5 members. So are we going to go in and reduce the number of members in the Zoning Board of Adjustment, or do we still need to fix this language?
So
sorry if that was unclear.
yeah,
In
one more
Section A-
time, Michelle, one more time.
In Section A, the new section in red, it says, or sorry, not in red, where it says, unless otherwise conflicted, the 4 members of the Zoning Board of Adjustment shall serve as members of the Building Code Board of Appeals. So it specifies 4 members in this, but our code specifies that the Zoning Board of Adjustment has 5 members.
And it certainly would be willing to discuss the red line addition there. It says, in addition to the foregoing pursuant to 18430, consist of 5 members, and then it exempts the building official who would serve as the secretary. So that would cover the 5th member.
So then are we adding the building official to the Zoning Board of Adjustment to make their membership 5?
I think that's a really fair question in terms of if you guys feel like that's appropriate. Frankly, probably not, to be honest with you. But we have, again, this inconsistency that presents itself from 1840-30 versus the number that you have in, as you indicated in Article 2.
Okay, so basically we need to make a decision on whether we want 4 or 5 members on our Zoning Board of Adjustment. Okay.
Yep. So do you have a suggestion?
I have no preference on that. I just want our language to be consistent.
You what?
I have no preference on how many members we have. I just want it to be consistent.
Okay. Does anybody have a preference? Would somebody like, personally, I think, I don't think the building official should be part of it, because especially if an appeal is coming, he should not sit on the board if an appeal is coming through the board. So he should not sit on it, or she, excuse me, he or she. So then it would seem like 4 members, so that the Board of Appeals shall consist of 4 members who are qualified by experience and training. Does that make sense? Or
So
is it not
that's-
consistent still?
That's still in conflict because our code says that we have 5 members on the zoning board. And what this is saying is that the zoning board members will serve on the Board of Appeals.
Why don't we just choose either 4 or 5 and take the building inspector out altogether?
So it seems like it would need to be 5, therefore, and no building inspector included.
I think that that makes a lot of sense. We also have to update 18430
Yeah.
with respect to that structure, which one of the points in my memo was, as we're going through this process, or as we had started being the town, going through the process of updating to the 2018 IBC, there's probably going to be some other instances of, or areas that we want to kind of update. But this is not, tangent aside, this has presented itself. We have to have the consistency. I think my recommendation would be that you have the 5, you make a change to the code to remove this reference to the building official serving, because it, even though they're secretary or an ex officio member, somebody could say, well, that's harassment, or I just don't feel comfortable going, approaching this person with the appeal.
Right. So then, we could make a motion to change this to 5 members with that, and then take out the building official as part of it. And then, would we do another motion to correct the code? Would that make sense, Bo?
Yeah, I think that would be the cleanest approach.
Okay. All right. So, any further discussion on that from the board? Motion 1, if somebody wants to make it.
I'll go ahead and make that. So I move that we set the number of members of both the Zoning Board of Adjustment and the Building Code Board of Appeals at 5, with the building official not serving as a member of either board.
Okay, can we get a second?
Second.
All right, further discussion from the board? All right, yes, Dave.
I just think that it's really nice to have an advisory committee that does not have a person that's directly involved as a member of that committee. And we've also kind of violated that with our water board by having staff on the water board. It seems to me the role of staff is to advise these boards, not to be a voting member of the board. So I think at some time we'll need to look at the water board too.
But the water board does not vote, they only advise, so they make no decisions, they can't, all they can do is present information to the board. So the role is different.
I'm just talking about the practice of having a staff member as a member.
Just to be clear, the staff members do not vote. It's just the 3 members. So, just to be clear.
Anything from the public? Yes, Suzanne.
Just for clarification, can you detail who the members of the current zoning board of adjustment are right now?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that there's
Corinne
been a
would have
formal-
that
formal
information and
appointment.
she's not here.
Okay, I actually went to the website really quickly here. There's a little bit of a mess going on with our boards, but that aside, what I'm seeing here, it's kind of screwy, actually, and I think we need to look at our zoning board of adjustment, too. I think there could be some issues there. There's a trustee seat, which I'm not sure if it's filled. So there's a TBD seat. Thomas Markle is on it, James Nordmanden is on it, and Barb Heck is on it. So I don't even think that we have a zoning board of adjustment that's properly appointed. And then aside from that, I see some names here that I've heard, you know, some people have construction experience, but I'm a little concerned by the fact that you might have a board who really has no ability to rule on anything, and it's all based on emotion and not on education or experience. So I don't know if there's some way of, if the zoning board of adjustment or a way of requiring some sort, at least for some members, of some experience, because you could be in the position of having 5 people who couldn't tell you how a shingle's supposed to be nailed on a roof, and that would be really problematic. So I don't know if you would have maybe a way to reach out into the community if the people want. I mean, I don't know. Are they going to be able to bring in like volunteers who are experts in topics, or how is that going to work? So I'm kind of diverging a little bit, but hopefully you can answer that about the Zoning Board of Adjustment, how it's going to look. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have anything else from the public? No, it's just 5 people. That's all we're voting on. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. Now, the second motion to change the code.
I'm sorry, I don't remember the reference. 18430.
Just so that we're picking up everything, I think it's all under 18430, but
Okay.
maybe the motion could be to update the municipal code to reflect that the building official shall not be a member or an ex officio member of the Board of Appeals.
Okay. Go for it, Michelle.
Okay, I move that we modify the municipal code to make it clear that the building official is not a member or ex officio member of the Zoning Board of Adjustment or the Board of Appeals.
All right, do we have a second? All right, any further discussion from the board? All right, Bill, I think if you want to make a comment, this would be the time for you to do it.
Upper 608 2nd Street. Yeah, kind of to reiterate something Suzanne said, a building board of adjustment needs to have people that have experience with the building code. You're in the code we have now, it says people with great experience. In the 2018 code, it breaks it down, and it requires people with, I can't cite it exactly, but it's 10 years experience with 5 years in a supervisory role in that area on specific areas of the code. And I just don't understand the point of having a group of citizens serving as a Board of Appeals on a technical matter like that. I just really don't understand it. I don't think it's a service to the community. And, you know, if the thing, you know, it's hard to fill these boards, but if you can't fill a Board of Appeals for the building code, maybe you shouldn't have the building code. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Paige.
Page Smith, 215 Delta, and I just want to bring up inconsistency in the code, and it's section 18.7-240, variance procedures. And the inconsistency is that several sections in here refer to an appeal board. I honestly don't know what an appeal board is, but it seems like you might want to be sure that you're not creating an internal inconsistency with that. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yes, Suzanne.
The appeal board that was just by Paige Smith speaks to part of what used to be our zoning code that got dumped into the building code section, and that appeal board referred to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. That's what it was. And so again, we have this little problem that happened a few years ago that needs to be looked into. But just the logistics of numbering the ordinance, I think you're calling this 18-5-30, is that correct? Or 18-4-30. And if you look at the building code, and I don't know if this is something the clerk would do or our town attorney, but the way our code is laid out right now, we've adopted 3 building codes. We have the International Residential Code, the International Building Code, which is commercial, and the International International Existing Building Code. What it does is we have the section like 18.1.10 that adopts it. There's 18.1.20 that tells about the copy on file, and then 18.1.30 amendments. So there's an amendment section for each of the codes that we've adopted. And in the amendment, it would say IBC section 112, Board of Appeals, I think it's 112, I'm doing it from memory, is amended to read blah, 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 blah. And you put your new language. And that way it's kind of easy to find. You realize we have this adopted code that we've adopted by reference, and here are the amendments that we've made to that code. So people know when they, so it's just a little bit accessible. And so I don't know, just for cleanliness sake, that might be the best logical way to arrange it. And if you can look at our code currently and see how the amendments are listed, and then maybe pattern this and fit it into that somehow, it might be the most understandable. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So do we need to do anything else with this, Bo? Do we need to accept it?
No, we've got the 2 changes that are in place, so I guess the question becomes, are you guys in a position where you want to do just a second reading? So do you want to introduce it tonight, or do you want to bring it back?
Yes,
I
Michelle.
do have some additional comments before we make a decision on the overall document.
Okay,
If
so bring it back.
Yep, is that?
Okay.
Well, I don't mean bring it back, I mean, are we going to continue going through the document tonight, or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Michelle, I completely misunderstood you.
No, that's okay. Just a couple more things. So again, in that same section, 18.11.10 section A, it says that the members will be qualified by experience and training. That's in the new edit, which is great. But I would still like us to specifically reference Appendix B of the International Building Code if we could, because they provide some very specific recommendations on what experience and training might mean. And I don't think we'll meet them all, but we could reference it and provide it for ourselves and for future boards to have something to look at when we're wondering what experience and training really means.
Okay.
So I move that we adjust that to specifically reference Appendix B of the International Building Code as suggested qualifications.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Yes, Mick.
So are we going to list this as requested qualifications? Because I think there's no way we're going to get enough people, qualified people, to meet those requirements. So, I don't think we can make it, that they have to meet these qualifications.
Yep, I agree with that. So I would say suggested qualifications rather than required qualifications. It just becomes a guiding document rather than a requirement.
All right, any further discussion? All right, anything from the public? All right, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on. More? Okay.
Section 18.11.30, this is on page 81 of the packet. The fees say that for all applications, a fee shall be charged to cover the administrative costs. And we had discussed at the last meeting possibly waiving that when the appeals board finds in favor of the applicant, being that a fee to contest a fee is a bit of a hardship. Yes, I move that we change section 181130 to add that fees are waived if the Board of Appeals finds in favor of the applicant.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Discussion. All right, seeing none. Anything from the public? Yes, Suzanne.
I think that's a good suggestion because I'd hate to see the town get in the business of hiring bad building inspectors so we could collect fees off of appeals. So this would be kind of a motivation on the town's part too, to hire someone who doesn't have to create a lot of appeals. Thanks.
All right, anything else? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. More?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Right, so we'll bring it back to the board with the suggested edits.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to new business, Lot 5 Hawkshaven subdivision pre-annexation extension request. Yes, ma'am. Finally.
I'm really not sure what I'm supposed to do. I just was asked to come.
If you want to say anything about, just kind of summarize what you're asking, that would be great.
Okay, I'm asking for a 5-year extension on the pre-annexation agreement on Lot 5 in Hawkshaven subdivision. In order to, otherwise the development has to be completed by December of this year, which isn't possible.
All right, thank you, Donna. Any questions for Donna? Yes, Mick.
So I see that there is a monthly standby fee that is assessed and collected. So your house is not built, but you do have a tap paid for in full. And are you being billed monthly by the town?
Not me personally. There's a collection of dues that are submitted to the homeowners association, and then those bills, I believe, are paid collectively. I'm not certain of the specifics.
Okay.
But I believe that's how it happens.
Right. Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's a monthly fee on the water tap that's being paid. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
I'm really not certain.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Michelle.
I do have a question, but it's not really for the applicant, and I apologize for my ignorance on this issue, but I'm wondering how the deadline of December was established in the first place, and if there are any administrative, legal, financial issues that are concerning about extending that deadline.
Bo.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if this Hawkshaven issue predates my service with the town, so I don't know if that was anything related to, that was just when the original agreement was entered into, or what the aspect or avenue was, but I'm not aware of anything with respect to that, other than it being a year-end date with that December.
My understanding is that it's just a simple matter of filing the documents back with the county.
And for the standby fee, do we know if it's our current standby fee rate, or is this like a grandfathered in previous standby fee?
Corinne would have that information. I don't.
Okay. My only concern is that we've talked in the past about other standby fees that exist for the town, that where an organization is getting a really fantastic rate and not paying a whole lot of money to the town for their standby taps, is my understanding. So I'm hoping that that's not the case here, and that we're keeping the standby fee current, and we're not moving forward an out-of-date standby fee by approving this.
Okay, now, yes, Cindy.
To my knowledge, the only standby fees that are different than everybody else's is the West Elk taps.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other discussion from the board? All right, seeing none, anything from the public? Yes, Bill.
Apologies. apologize for mouthing off and everything. But I think there's another issue here. That's why isn't Hawks Haven part of the town? Okay, you've got a pre-annexation agreement with everybody in Hawks Haven. Hawks Haven has a situation where there is one of those lots with this that is ripe for annexation. It has a perimeter that is contiguous with the town by the state law of more than 1/6. The town has an obligation, a statutory obligation, to annex properties next to town as they become appropriate for annexation. This is the other side of being able to have a say in what goes on around town. Like in, when there's development, you have a sphere of influence around town. That's based on the assumption that you're going to annex it. And so the thing to do here is to annex Hawks Haven, and then the pre-annexation agreement just disappeared. And there's nobody else in town that has a limitation on when they have to develop their tap. There's no problem at all. Why aren't we annexing Hawks Haven? That's the question. Because, if you got all these pre-annexation agreements, what are they for? If you don't annex when you can, I think you're violating that agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yes, Michelle?
Just a follow-up question related to that. If we approve the extension of the pre-annexation, would that in any way limit our ability to annex, should the town find that that's the appropriate next step?
I don't believe so, because the agreement still is the agreement and we can annex whenever.
I would agree with that. I would agree also that notwithstanding this agreement, our annexation powers would supersede that. So.
Okay.
Notwithstanding the agreement, I would believe that the town would have the ability to, under its annexation powers, to supersede it.
Can we get a motion to accept this? Yes, Michelle.
I'd like to,
yeah. Go, Dave.
Well, rock, paper, scissors. I'd like to move that we approve the subdivision pre-annexation extension request.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
Any further discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right, let's move on to Nature Connection and Western Slope. Thank you for your patience, Donna.
If I may make another motion related to that?
Okay.
And whether a motion is needed, I'm not sure, but I would like to get an administrative review of whether we are required to annex that development at this time, at the administrator's convenience.
Can we hold off on that? We've got a bunch of water stuff on our thing, and I don't want to load Corinne when she comes back. I don't think it's a good idea right now. I think this is something that we can look at our priorities and decide where this fits. There's a lot of stuff about the roads up there and whether we would accept the roads. The roads are totally substandard for what we want. There's some huge issues about drainage on it too. So accepting an annexation of that would be really fraught with problems, and there's a big history there. It's such a big issue that I think it would really tie us in knots, and we don't need to be tied in knots with that right now. So that's my opinion.
And I would agree with Dave on this one. This is not a simple slam dunk, let's annex them or not. And, there's also the issue of whether they want to be annexed or not and how hard they would fight that as well. So even though we have the power in this regard, it's a much thornier issue than it appears on the surface.
I think that's something that maybe we can put in the parking lot for her to do. All right, thank you.
Yeah, Michelle. Okay, so Nature Connection, Western Slope. Thank you, guys.
How's it going, everyone?
Hey, we're still here. We only have an hour left.
All right. Thanks for your time. We wanted to just give a project update. Corinne thought it would be appropriate. We also had a few requests from the board, including, I guess we'll go through them.
So project update, Paonia Town property and Delta School District property share boundaries of the trail that will be building. I believe the first crew comes on June 1st to do some saw work down there. And so in preparation for that, we wanted, did Corinne include this in the packet, a map and the text of a few requests? Cool. So the first thing that we wanted to do was talk about the town's in-kind contribution and kind of get that laid out on paper. So Jake.
Yep. Jake Harder with Western Slope Conservation Center. Yeah, it's been a number of years that this trail's been under development and under the design, and there's been a turnover in board members and of course a new mayor, and so we thought it'd be good to come back and revisit. And this in-kind portion was approved by the town a couple years ago with a grant we had applied for. But what it entails is some excavation work, dirt work, from Grand Avenue Bridge down slope to where the town of Paonia and Delta County own that property where the trail is. You'll recall that slope is pretty steep. And I met with Travis, Public Works, the other day to look at that slope to see if there was a way to grade that in a way that we'd like to get as close to ADA as possible. That's not necessarily lined out in our grant, but it'd be great to get at least the slope to that point, and then at some point in the future we could make other amendments to get to ADA. So wish Travis was here, but he took a look at it and thought it looked doable. So there would be that grade work there. There's another portion of the trail where it goes along the river for a time and then comes back up. There'd be some excavation work to push some gravel to make another slope there. And then coming back the loop around back to where it starts there at Grand Avenue Bridge, our intent is to have the trail connect to the River Park Trail through the Historical Society's property there, but along the river. That grade also from Grand Avenue down to that property is fairly steep. So we're probably looking at more fill and not necessarily excavation, from what I understand from Travis. But those would be the three areas that we're asking the town to contribute in-kind work.
Okay, any questions for Ben and Jake from the board? Yeah, Dave.
The only thing I was wondering is when we looked at the map for Riverbank, it was pretty obvious that there are only 2 private properties that prevent us from keeping the trail along the river and coming to, and it seems that both those property owners, their homes are on the opposite side of the river. And it just seems a shame to be building this trail right through the middle of Riverbank and then coming back down to the bridge when we can just stay along the river the whole time. So I just wonder if there's been any exploration with those 2 property owners, because there isn't much needed for an easement along there, and it doesn't affect them because they're on the other side of the river.
Yeah, we haven't reached out to those property owners. And we haven't really had much other follow-up with the Riverbank development. We did go down there, and the route that they have proposed for us crosses through some significant wetland areas, and a biologist who we consult with also was like, yeah, those are pretty significant wetlands. So we need to work with them to propose that. I mean, if they want to still keep the trail where they have penciled it in, would require a lot more expense because those wetland areas would need like boardwalks. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that. I think we're hoping to go ahead with this project, this work this summer, sign the trail as to be continued, possibly have a laminated map so people can see the route, and then keep working on that stretch with EVO and the developers. So.
Good.
But yeah, I'll look into those 2 and talk with maybe Corinne about contacting those 2 landowners and see what we can do.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think in the Riverbank presentation, there were other issues with taking it down to the river, which is why they didn't want to do it, if I remember correctly, but
yeah,
I can't remember
I think
specifics.
we just need to get down there and go on the ground. We've been looking at maps a lot, and then when you actually get down there, you're like, oh, this is where we're supposed to build the trail. If we shifted over that way like 30 feet, it would be way cheaper and easier. So that might just be a next phase conversation, but yeah, we don't want to lose sight of the eventual connection piece.
Right.
For sure.
Absolutely. All right, other questions? Yes, Mick.
So the in-kind contribution, that would be for man-hours and equipment from the town, no fill, no rocks, any of that stuff, or were you looking for that as well?
No, there would be fill. There's probably
would
some
be fill?
significant, and I talked to Travis about that. He's still got to do some measuring, but there would be some fill, road base likely.
Okay.
We have a parent of the Paonia Elementary Parent Committee who has volunteered as many boulders as we need, and I have her contact information. We're going to connect Travis. If we need to get boulders, this would be a free source and large amounts. So.
All right, other questions? Yes, Tammy.
Yeah, so in the MOU, there's just a section that lines out the town's annual contribution. I think usually we have those say subject to annual appropriation. So I don't know if we want to.
Oh yeah, I would love to get to the next. Is it okay if we get a thumbs up on the in-kind contribution, then we'll go to the MOU?
Oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
It's okay.
Yeah, I have no other questions on the in-kind section.
Let's finish up with questions on, any other questions on the in-kind section? All right. Yeah, Tammy.
So what's your time frame on this? Is this something you need right away?
Yeah, I spoke with Travis. We have a saw crew coming out next week to June to clear the trail. But the trail crew itself to install is in July. And I spoke with Travis about that. He seemed to think that was doable, but it would need to be done by July 1st.
And then we have a completion date for our grant by November 1st, but our goal is to try to have the trail open for the beginning of the school year, so August 15th.
Okay. Any further questions on the in-kind? All right, anything from the audience? Public? Yes, Paige.
Paige Smith, 215 Delta. This is just the first time looking at this. So does this comport with Paonia in Motion and all the work that's been done about trails in town? Is this going to be part of that?
We both been part of that, so we can answer it. It's been, this trail has been in the works long before the Paonia in Motion group started, but it has been included as part of one of their trails in their planning process, so it's definitely included as part of the discussion.
Yeah, we're hoping that they could provide some assistance kind of visualizing what the crossing could look like. Delta County is committed as their in-kind portion to do a crosswalk, a proper crosswalk there at Grand Avenue where the trail crosses from the Historical Society, the museum, to the school. And so they were going to put together some drafts of what crosswalk ideas besides just putting stripes on the ground, but given that it's the county, we probably will just get stripes on the ground. But we at least can ask for something more than stripes on the ground.
Maybe. All right. So I guess we need a motion to approve the in-kind.
I think the issue that Trustee Bunger's bringing up is that it doesn't say in-kind in the MOU, and that needs to be specified, because you read it and it says $5,000.
Yeah, so I guess the in-kind was technically approved by the prior town council. Corinne just wanted to make sure that this town council was okay with going ahead and doing the in-kind contribution for the work in like a week or a month.
Right.
These are two separate issues in a sense. So this is just for the dirt work, the in-kind portion.
Right.
But you would be something for that.
Yes.
Okay.
So for the MOU, we'd want the MOU to say in-kind too, because we're obligating the town for several years of out-of-pocket costs, and we'd you know, we want to stand by what prior councils have committed to. But it's, what you're asking for, if I'm reading the MOU right, is that we're going to give this annually ad infinitum and it doesn't stop, right?
Says annual trail maintenance, and there is no end date on it, yeah?
And I'm a little uncomfortable with going into, because I'm not going to live that long, you
Yeah.
know?
So if we're okay with just the dirt work, just getting Travis to get with Jake to
Right.
do the dirt work, then we can go to the MOU and do that separately. And I would love, the MOU was just a first draft. I don't write a lot of MOUs, and I would love your feedback, but essentially this was just first draft to begin the conversation of what an annual agreement could look like.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what we would like motion for is just to approve Travis to do the dirt work
Yes.
That'd be
as
great.
in kind. All right?
Madam Mayor?
Sure.
I'd like to move that we approve the in-kind contributions by our Public Works Department in support of this project
Do I have a second?
in the amount of $5,000.
Well, no, there isn't.
Amount,
No,
okay.
let's not make it $5,000.
Okay.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Further discussion from the board? Yes, Michelle.
Do we have an anticipated cost to the town for the fill that we would be providing and how many hours this might entail?
Travis would, for sure,
Travis would.
but I can't answer that.
I'd just like to have a number associated before we approve an open-ended.
And certainly you could maybe do like at an amount not to exceed, so.
Do you have even a ballpark estimate that we could use to put that together?
Maybe I could
Without-
rephrase my motion.
Without knowing the
Okay,
grade and
I'd like to reframe it. I'd like to say that I move to approve in-kind contributions of labor and materials not to exceed $5,000. Labor, equipment, and materials not to exceed $5,000.
And Tammy, would you agree to your second?
Yes.
All right. Further discussion? All right, anything from the public? Yes, Suzanne.
It sounds like there's some general board support here, but I'm wondering if, is this something that needs to be decided tonight, or can it be deferred till the next meeting when you can get a little bit more information from Travis so you can be a little more clear on things? It sounds like they kind of have somewhat of an assurance that you guys are going to go forward with something, but I'm just wondering, for being realistic, would it be helpful to have some hard numbers here before you make a final decision? Thanks.
Okay, anything else? Yes, Michelle.
Yeah, just a question, another question for staff. Since it sounds like the in-kind was approved previously by a previous board, I'm wondering if there were any numbers associated at that time, if we have any information on that, so that we could review what was approved. No, okay.
Obviously not. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Yes.
Excuse me, can I say a word on timing?
Yes, please.
We would need it done, the excavation or the grading done by June 1st. So as far as, or I'm sorry, July 1st rather. Sorry, the months are getting confused. July 1st is when our trail crew is coming. So if it's possible to meet with the board again before that, but it is getting pretty tight at that point.
All right, well, we do have a motion and a second on the table. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. You have your in-kind. All right.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. The second item was the MOU. We would love any feedback, questions. I mean, this is something that does not necessarily have as quick of a time stamp.
Okay.
But it's something that the school board and also the Nature Connection board would like to get the process started of drafting this MOU. Something that, yeah, the $5,000 contribution, I'd love any language there, subject to approval, subject to annual Whatever additions, I can jot down what you guys would like, or have Corinne give us some feedback. And then, you know, some of this stuff is just taken of the agreement we have with the North Fork Rec District, which is where we've built other trails. The general liability insurance is something we cover for all of our programs. You know, the high school, the internship, the intern maintenance piece is a piece that we did want to kind of put in there, because I know the town doesn't want to take on additional maintenance items. And that $5,000 is roughly what we've budgeted, about 2.5 to 3 weeks of high school intern maintenance time. But we do want to be clear about the capability of high school interns, and that if there are significant public safety concerns, that we'd like to get the town, you know, Travis involved or whomever, to say, you know, trail is closed, or if there's significant like tree fall or flooding or something big and huge, we might have to, like the Conservation Center has had to do kind of rework it and stuff like that. So, yeah, Mick. Oh.
Yes, Mick.
I think you do have a pretty active community or committee that keeps a pretty close eye on that. So anything that would come up that might be dangerous, I think that committee would report it back to one of you two, that they would certainly handle that as well. So.
Okay. Well, I would recommend that we have Corinne take a look at this, and, you know, if need be, you know, put her heads together with Bo and see if we need any legalities taken care of, and so bring it back to the board at a later date.
Great. Cool. Perfect.
All right. Thank you for the first draft, though.
Yeah, thanks. The third piece is we have money budgeted from a CPW grant to do design of a bridge, and because that construction will occur on town of Paonia property, we would like, I guess, the board's support that I work with, is it Travis who does RFPs for construction projects? I don't know who at that level would. I would like to draft an RFP to get to get the bridge designed, but that has to come officially from the town of Paonia rather than Nature Connection, because it's not on school district property.
Then that's something that Corinne could put together, or Travis could put together.
Great. So I'll work with them. So that's just the update. We'll be releasing that. And then the final piece, I just put some bullet points on this memo to you guys about just because the trail crosses between town and school district property pretty at a number of different points. So the school district was just wanted some guidelines around liability and who had liability over the trail, to just make sure that there was something in writing. And I don't know if the MOU is the right place for that, or if there's a legal letter that the school district signs and the town signs.
I would need to research that a little bit more. I'm just not familiar enough with the area.
Okay, yeah, we can look at it and then see who would have liability on that and get back to you again.
Cool. Great.
Yes, Dave.
I would like to see, as part of this agreement, how much skin in the game the school district has on this too. Because I think this is all on school district property, and I want to see that there's a fair share, and that it's a shared contribution between two. And so the main thing is, what is the school giving to it?
Yeah.
That's I want to make sure.
Yeah, so the Nature Connection received a $55,000 grant from GOCO to pay for the trail construction. So I would say that's the initial skin. And then in terms of like annual maintenance
if we're going to commit, we want the school district to commit too.
Great. Cool.
Conservation Center.
We'll rope them in.
Well, yeah, the Nature Connection is part of the school too, is it not?
Yeah, so we are Delta County School District, just doing business as. So
okay.
We can put that in the MOU.
Okay.
We have been working with the school district pretty closely on all of this, and obviously very supportive of it. So it's something we can work on.
Okay, yes, Suzanne.
I agree with Trustee Knudsen's comment about I'd kind of like to see the budget for this and how it's going to work. But I'd like to remind you, when you start committing money to these out-of-town trails or these accessory trails, we aren't even that generous with our rights of way. I mean, we have to cough up $3 every month for our own sidewalks. And then there's no money for tree care in the right of way. And I feel a little uncomfortable that we're committing our resources to things outside there, and we aren't taking care of our core. And we definitely need help with our trees here in town. There's a lot of dead branches from these weird weather patterns we're having, and it's going to impact public safety here locally. And right now, it's supposed to be all borne by the property owner, and we're talking thousands of dollars here. So every little penny that you're putting elsewhere makes me a little bit uncomfortable. We're spreading ourselves awfully thin. Thanks.
All right, so do you have what you need, gentlemen? All right, thank you so much for coming, and we'll be back. All right, take care. All right, next is up, Amy, you're finally up. Amy, can we take the mic to you?
Will it work over there?
I don't know if it'll work because it needs to be under one of those little bubbles. No, I don't know that it's going to work, Ben. Yeah, it's the issue of the receivers on the ceiling that is the problem. All right. Go, Amy.
Well, are we going to hit both of my things in one go right now? Because that would sure be nice. The mural and the approval of the liquor license. The special event liquor license. Oh, great. Perfect. Great. Okay, one down, one to go. So hopefully you have in your packet the mural proposal for Hollis Park. It's a collaborative with 3 different artists in the valley. There is a narrative that goes with it, with hopefully you have as well. And I can answer any questions. They're ready to roll. We're really excited about it. This has been something that was pushed back to this year. We couldn't see the project through last year for a number of reasons. So anyway, this is it. We're excited, and I'm hoping we can have approval and move forward. That's my shtick.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Any questions for Amy from the board? Yeah, Dave.
There seems to be a lot of Native American depiction in this, and I'm wondering if this has been run by the Ute tribe or Roland McCook, as far as just how the tribe sees this depiction.
So the artist collaboration have had support from various artists within the tribe. Elsewhere specifically has connections and residency affiliations with some of the Ute artists. There's actually a further, we applied for a much larger grant that included some of these artists who are doing residencies at Elsewhere in the coming year. So it has a kind of a longer, bigger vision. So this would just kind of be the first install until those artists can participate.
Does the narrative reflect that? I think the narrative should show that there's been, because I think the main thing I'm concerned about is this land that we're living on, and Trustee Johnson and I have both brought this up at different times about sensitivity to Native American culture and the original people that lived on this land. And I just want to make sure the narrative reflects that, and that the design itself has no, like a lot of times depictions, Native American depictions are by Anglos and they can be offensive. So I want to make sure we're not going there.
Yeah, I think I can confidently say the artist team took to heart the cultural appropriation and got some good feedback and collaborative process. Is the narrative in your packet? Okay. Sorry, I'm not sure what I can do about that except for just to forward it on and email it to the group or I can send it off to Amanda or But there is quite a conversation about that, about the First Peoples of this valley. Water specifically as being one of the most precious resources. There's quite a lot of water in that imagery, and then of course all the agricultural components of our life here. And I don't know, for me, I feel like the image really speaks for itself. I think it checks all the boxes.
Okay, yes, Tammy.
So I won first place in the state for a column I did, and it was, if you give something a Ute name, make sure it's a Ute word, because some people were doing a subdivision, and they wanted to call it, I can't remember the word, but it wasn't, and they said, and it was Ute for freedom bird, and it turns out Utes don't have a word for freedom, and they were never contacted. So one thing I would strongly suggest, if you haven't done, even if you have artists from the tribe, contact the tribe leaders. The moral of the whole column was they're more than willing to even come and give it a blessing if you just talk to them. So I don't know if you have reached out to the tribes.
Yeah.
But if you, so you've actually spoken to tribal leaders.
I have not personally spoken to tribal leaders, but the artist team, as I mentioned already, has been in a collaboration with the Ute of this area and have sought their counsel through the whole process.
Okay, wonderful. It's just really important, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I was going to bring it up too. I saw the white buffalo, and I thought, you know, is this appropriate? That's not for us to say. That's only for the Utes to say, and I can't stress what Dave was saying enough. Make sure the Ute tribes, all of them, all three of them, are okay with it, because they won't say anything if they're not, you know, if they don't know about it, or if they find out about it later, you know, they're upset, and they're such kind-hearted, wonderful, generous people. I just so would encourage you to reach out to the tribal leaders and say, hey, we've got some Native American artistic rendering here, however you want to put it, and just get their blessing. They'll give it to you, unless, and they would even look at it and say, well, you know, maybe this isn't right, or, but I just so highly encourage you to do that, because like Dave said, this is their land. So thank you.
Yes, Dave.
I really like the part of the mural with the lightning, because it represents the contentiousness of our meetings.
I gotta buy you all flowers after this one.
I was going to say, do we need that on the back wall here?
Are they all this long to get to this point?
All right. Any other comments, questions from the board? All right. Seeing none, anything from the public? All right. Seeing none, can we have a motion to approve the mural for Polis Park? Yes, Tammy.
I move that we approve the Polis Park wall mural for the North Fork Valley Creative Coalition.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. Thank you for your patience and perseverance, Amy. All right, moving on. Requirements for use of various areas of town park. All right, this has come up. Where's my thing? Hold on. My computer is being wonky again. Okay. So we have a staff recommendation that food vendors for events utilize the paved areas of town park, and that, so discussion of vendors for green space versus finished spaces. Does the board have any feelings on, for example, if the other booths, for example, clothing and jewelry and those kind of things, because this is going to come up at Cherry Days, for sure. They have a whole lot of vendors. Mountain Harvest has a whole lot of vendors. As far as Pickin', mostly those are food vendors. Yeah, go Karen. That is one component of this. I mean, we can broaden the discussion to talk about, what do we want to see as far as other vendors go, because there's no way you're going to take all the Cherry Days vendors and put them on the pavement, especially if they bring in the amusement rides again. That's just not going to work. So do other people have feelings and thoughts? Yes.
So I think what we're trying to do here is reduce the impact on our grassy
Right.
areas, right? So what about something where if an event is held multiple times, once a week or something like that, they use the concrete areas for their vendors. If it's a one-time event, as long as we don't have any events happening within a week, they can use whatever area of the park is appropriate, because that will allow enough time for the grassy areas to recover between events.
So then we're basically talking about only the Arbol Farm Market, because that's the only thing that runs on a weekly basis. Everything else is either a 2 or 3 day event, and that's it.
Or Pickin' is weekly.
Well, yeah,
when
but
it's
that's
happening.
weekly.
Yeah, or I don't know. I don't even know what the appropriate buffer is to keep our grassy areas safe, but if it's 10 days, then it would be great if we could get that information, maybe from the maintenance crew, find out what they think is appropriate, and then if events are closer together than 10 days, somebody's going to have to be on the concrete to allow the grassy area time to recover, or at least be on a different part of the grass, is my thinking.
Okay. Yeah, Nick.
I think it depends on the size of the event. If the vendors can fit on the paved area, let's have them on the paved area. If the event is too big that it then has to spread over into the grass, let's do that.
Hey, any other thoughts? Karen, did you have something you wanted?
That it is a park to be used,
And I do think part of the concern is that the parks are not in good shape currently. That who knows how long our ditch water is going to last, which means who knows how long we're going to be able to water our parks. So this year, it seems like it's much more of a concern than it would be if we have an El Nino year and we have good monsoons and it's raining every other day. Then it's not so much of a concern. I think, I like the staff recommendation, put the food vendors out in the paved area if we can possibly do it, because they get the most traffic, in truth. The other vendors, people tend to wander around, and it's not standing in line, eating food, all the rest of that. So that's my thoughts on this. Yes, Michelle?
Is this something that needs to be a board decision, or could we direct staff to require events to locate as necessary for proper park maintenance?
I don't think that we necessarily need to make this a motion. I think, have staff look at the least impact on the grass as can be done, and that's just their direction. All right, Suzanne.
I do agree with where you're going with this right now, Mayor Bachran. I went over and checked out the farmers market before I came here, and it was bustling. It kind of had a street fair vibe to it. There were some vendors that had lines that might have impeded the flow a little bit, but then again, I think people like to feel like they're in a busy crowd sometimes. There's an energy to that. But in a way, maybe, this just what we've talked about in past meetings, what you're talking about now, we might want to just study how this is working out before you start creating a more formal policy to kind of, we're testing it out a little bit. And, they might find that the way you space the vendors, so all the lines aren't in one spot, and so there's a little bit of a science to it and a little bit of a, let's see how it goes. to it. But I thought it was pretty neat, the way it felt tonight. Perhaps you want to fill the paved area up first, or, you know, use the most high traffic kind of things, but then you don't want to like leave everybody else that doesn't get a lot of traffic out there, because people might not go by their tents. And sometimes maybe being next to a food vendor, you get a lot of people looking at your stuff as a merchant. So I don't know, it'll be interesting just to see how it goes with what we've got going now. Thanks.
And I agree with Suzanne. If you haven't been out to Arbor Farm Market, please go, because it is truly wonderful out there what they are putting together. So it's very cool. All right, so we're just going to recommend staff try and do the least impact and probably get the food vendors onto the pavement. Yes, Tammy.
This is just popped into my head. I wonder if too for Picken, I think they close off the street to the west of the park anyway. Maybe I wonder if, since it's so close to the stage, if the food vendors could be on the street and that street could be closed. Just a thought.
It could be, yeah, and I don't remember if they close that off or just close it off to set up and then there's traffic through there, because I think there's parking on that street and it's on. But yeah, if they do, let's put them out there. All right, let's move on to fund balance financial policy. Mr. King, you get a state at the end of the meeting. Oh my God.
Thanks heaps. As all the board knows, this policy was developed in response to the board's interest in the concepts of reserves, restricted reserves, other treatment of capital that the town has had in the past, versus the revenue shortfalls and unanticipated expenditures, and obviously the need for compensating fund balances when we start preparing grant applications. Another added dimension to this that isn't included in this policy, but is the depreciation policies that the town has in place. And I would heartfully recommend that I support the staff recommendations. And lastly, I'd like to thank Cindy for all the work she put together. She did to put this together. She researched a number of other municipalities, and it was in an attempt to answer a lot of the questions the board had about how we account for funds in our budgeting process and why certain funds need to have reserves and some funds need to have extensive reserves. So that's my opening statement. And I'm prepared to answer questions, and I've got Cindy here to back me up.
Thank you, Ross. And I have to say, I found this document to be very enlightening, and I appreciate the work, because now I understand much better our fund balances and why we keep reserves and all the rest of that. So let's start out with questions from the board. You can make a comment if you wish, Dave. You can phrase your comment as a question too, if you so desire.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. First of all, I think that the due diligence on this that Cindy did by looking at the best practices that are out there right now really informed this document quite well. I just want to make the board aware of just how impactful following this is, because this is a huge difference in departure in how we budgeted in the past. You know, we're really paying, I mean, we heard a lot from our finance director this last budget round about the necessity and how difficult it was, and we did some utility increases because of the necessity of building these reserves, and this calls for even more of that. So I just want you to be aware that this is aspirational, and I hope we can follow it.
Thank you, Dave. Other comments, questions? Michelle.
Yeah, I have a few questions. The first one is on the draft page 3. Special revenue funds, the paragraph on marijuana revenues. It says that they're restricted to street capital improvement. I just want to verify that that includes everything that we had in the ballot language for those funds to go to. So infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, curb, gutter, drainage, landscaping, lighting, all of that. So
I don't believe that was specifically laid out in the ballot initiative. It was street capital, I believe, is what the
no,
language.
I'm reading from
Oh,
the
I'm
ballot
sorry,
language.
then correct. Sorry.
Infrastructure repair and improvements, including but not limited to town streets, sidewalks, curb, gutter, drainage, landscaping, lighting, and streetscape amenities. So I just want to make sure that if we're putting that in street capital improvement, that we can do all of those things with those funds that we told the public we were going to do.
The street capital improvement fund was not what was, that fund was not voted on.
Right.
The sidewalk fund is what was voted on.
What she's asking, Cindy, is that everything that we wrote into the marijuana ordinance is covered under street capital. So that sidewalks, curbs, gutters, if you want to read that list again, Michelle?
Right, so there's the paragraph that says Street Capital Improvement Fund on page 3 of the draft. This is page 99 of the packet. And what it says is that the citizens approved marijuana and restricted the revenues to street capital improvement only. But what the ballot language actually said was town streets, sidewalks, curb, gutter, drainage, landscaping, lighting, and streetscape amenities. So I want to make sure that we're putting the funds in the place where we can spend them the way that people voted that we spend those funds. Does that make sense?
That is streets.
So the Street Capital Improvement Fund covers all of that.
Yes.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
So street capital improvement is just a subsidiary fund of streets. It's technically not a separate fund. It is part of the street fund, which is part of the general fund.
Right, and I understand that, but the language in this draft says that marijuana is restricted to street capital improvement. Oh.
I think that the 3% that they're talking here is not the marijuana funds.
No.
This is the impact funds.
This is the impact fee.
That's under this
The
paragraph.
The sentence after that, though, is where it specifically
Yeah, it
talks
says
about
in
marijuana.
November
Oh,
2020.
that one, the marijuana, I see. Yes, just flush that out a little
I'll
bit.
rewrite it.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
That was, we didn't have the language of the ordinance when I wrote this.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good.
So on draft page 9 and 10, it talks about performance measurements, and I'm curious exactly what's meant by that, if it's suggested that the board should be developing performance measurements for staff, or if the administrator is going to provide the board with performance measurements related to this.
Could you say what page again you're talking about?
Yeah, it's draft page 9 and 10, which is packet page 105 and 106. And it's the last, it starts at the very end of page 9 or page 105. So just whose performance are we measuring? Is this just our measurement of the administrator's performance, or are we getting performance measurements of other departments to review against the budget?
These performance measurements are not they're not people. These are number performance measures.
That clarifies it. Thank you.
You have another one?
Yeah, draft page 12. That's packet page 108. The paragraph regarding use of unrestricted fund balance and the requirement for voting. I think the whole document is fantastic, but for that particular statement, I don't know if that's something we need to adopt by ordinance, if we're saying, like, this is how the board would have to vote to make these decisions, or if this document is sufficient to serve as our sort of legal goalposts for that.
Tell me what you're talking about exactly.
So this is page 12 of the draft, page 108 of the packet, and it's right in the middle, the use of the unrestricted fund balance. And it talks about voting requirements for the Board of Trustees, how we would make decisions about that. And I just want to make sure if we need an ordinance to formalize that, that we take that on.
I would suggest, Madam Trustee, that if in fact you adopt this policy or implement this policy, it would be the administrator's responsibility to advise the board if you are exceeding either the 25% or reducing it below the 17% for board action. I don't know that you'd have to pass an ordinance that would, and I defer to the town attorney if he would think that that would be necessary.
Yeah, respectfully, obviously the majority would come into play irregardless. The issue is the 507 or the supermajority that's highlighted. That would have to be a standalone issue because that this couldn't govern those our procedures or supersede our procedures.
So you're saying we would need a standalone ordinance to state that that's how this process would play out?
With respect to that 17%.
Yeah.
Now, if you were just going to require a majority, I would say no, because that's not what, because it's an atypical voting process is
right.
what I'm trying to explain.
Yeah. Okay, then related to that, I would move that we put an ordinance, assuming that we approve this document, that we put that on the agenda to prepare an ordinance so that we can stay in line legally with what we need to do to have that supermajority vote.
I'm gonna need to do some research, but I'm pretty sure that this is already in our policies.
You know, and it seems like
90% of what this came from 3 different sources of what we already have. So I need to double check, but I think that's already spelled out in our code.
Okay, yeah, if you could come back to us with that, Cindy, that would be very helpful.
And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the board? All right, Dave? No. Okay, I do have a question. Let's see if I can find it again. All right, my question is on page 101 of the packet and page 5 of the document, and we're talking about the enterprise funds, and in the water fund it says, let's see, where is it, the 10% the upper system, yep, the lower system. All right, the primary sources of revenue are charges for service for operational expense. This fund is used to account for revenues and expenses. The operation also, oh, that's not it. Darn it, I lost it. All right, let me find it. Dave, did you have something you wanted to say? So it was about the total budget. Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm sorry. It's above enterprise funds. It's in that very first section at the top of the page. And it says enterprise funds are defined as being government-owned businesses authorized to issue its own revenue bonds and receiving under 10% of its annual revenue in grants from all of Colorado. So that 10% of its annual revenue in grants, does that include grants that would upgrade like the water system or upgrade an enterprise fund, or is that a different kind of grant revenue source that I don't know about?
I think that could be a case-by-case basis, right? So it could be that you get a grant for infrastructure and you use that to apply to upgrading sewer line. Does that help explain?
Well, my concern is, so if the total budget for like is $1,261,878, then the maximum grant that we would be able to write was only $126,000, because that's 10%. So we couldn't go for a $500,000 grant or a $750,000 grant to support our enterprise funds via infrastructure, if this is true.
That is incorrect, so I will
Okay.
I will review that.
Okay, thank you.
Not to confuse the issue, but when I read that, I just assumed it had to do with grant funds that the town might receive in addition to anything that they did proactively to secure grants to help in capital expenditure projects or something of that nature. Now, as Cindy said, she's going to look into it, but I just assumed that was what it was. It didn't have anything to do with applying for grants for capital expenditure projects.
We'll get clarified. Yes, Michelle.
So just to clarify, we're talking about grants being separate from operating revenue. So the operating revenue couldn't have more than 10% from grants, but we could get much larger grants because they're not part of that operating. Is that right?
If that's what Cindy's going to look at.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure if we get, I doubt we get any revenue, grant revenue just for operating in this. Yeah, I would agree. Okay, anything else from the board? All right, Suzanne.
Curious on page 105 of the packet, page 9 specifically, on the expenditures. I don't quite understand why you have to list personnel costs there. And it's kind of specific, your wording in there. And I know in the state regulations there's been some changes to compensation and personnel, and they list specifically what it can be based on, like educational levels and experience and blah blah blah. And I don't know, why is this wording in here? What's the purpose of putting that in there? You know, why are you drilling down on personnel costs in this document? I'm just wondering, isn't some of this kind of a given? So I don't know, why is there this little bit of a lobbying effort, it seems like here? And then, is it necessary to put it in there? And then the other question I have is, how does this affect, like trying to come up with reserve? We have a huge amount of work that's going to have to done on the water system with lining the tank. We're looking at incredible amounts of money that we're going to need to be spending, and I anticipate the water rates being raised for this. But so I haven't looked through this enough to really get a feeling for this, but are you trying to raise revenue, these fund balances, in addition to, how are we going to pay for both things? How are we going to increase the rates for the fund policy that we want to have, the reserve policy, and for the tank lining and the new tank and blah blah? I'm just wondering if it's realistic. How concrete is this? How flexible is it? If for some reason we just can't afford those reserve funds right now because we have this really big project we've got to raise money for off the backs of the ratepayers. Is that clear, or did I ramble?
It's very fair, and you are going probably shocked at some of the impacts of these policies, but you're not going to do it in 1 year in any case. There's no way this town could afford to do it unless you wanted to double the water rates and sewer rates and everything else. No. You point out a problem that we're going to be faced with, and this board's going to be faced with, and we're going to have to deal with it as we go through the budget process, and when we decide what issues in the JDS report that we want to approach and fund. There's a lot of things that are going to have to be looked at when we're doing that.
So this is aspirational in a way. Okay, great,
That's
thanks.
what Mr. Knudsen said.
All right, anything else? All right, so I guess Cindy, you will bring us back an updated version? Thank you again for all your incredibly hard work on this. Like I say, it was very enlightening for me. All right, let's move on. Mayor's report. It was included in the packet. I will say I did attend the Municipal Quarterly. It was a wonderful meeting today. I strongly urge other board members, when it comes back in August, to come with me because it's a wonderful experience and you learn so much about what's going on in the county. That's all I've got. Committee reports, finance and personnel. Okay. Government affairs, public safety.
Our next meeting is tentatively set for Monday, June 7th at 12:15, and I have nothing further to add.
All right. Moving along. Public works, utilities, facilities. It's all on you, Tammy.
I have nothing new to report. We have not met since the last meeting.
Okay. Tree board.
Also, nothing new to report. The tree board did meet, but I was out of town. I have not contacted the chair to find out what happened.
Okay. Advisory water committee.
So we did meet last Wednesday, and in addition to talking about how to discuss the JDS hydro without discussing it in public was a big topic of conversation. We're just going to submit our comments and individually. And we also discussed the possibility of a pilot local gray water control program, presenting that to the board at some time in the future. Committee member Markle made a very rough draft of what he is envisioning. It would be a very simple, basic level work from the beginning, and then hopefully build on that. Something that we hope to bring to the board in the near future. Pretty interesting subject, gray water. And other than that, nothing new to report.
All right. Then we have completed our agenda, and I adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody. We actually did it 6 minutes before our time expired, too.